Well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the meteorite extinction event to my unsuspecting dinosaurs, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Well, it's good to be with you, Daniel, and, we may or may not be visited as of late by powers outside of our control.
Are you saying that we may be on the verge of another extinction level event?
Depends on who you ask, but could be.
Yeah,
You never know.
And who you trust. Hey, but hey, the truth is out there, and we will definitely get into that and what might be one of our last Collision Live episodes, depending on what our extraterrestrial neighbors decide to do. But hey, we're excited to have you guys join us. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on this week for us to get into, to have conversations about. Kind of the big thing probably is the real buzzy, controversial "He Gets Us" ad that from the Super Bowl, and a lot of people talking about that. So we will definitely get into that, and just other cancel culture and other things going on in social media, celebrities and all that fun stuff. So we're glad you're joining us. Encourage you guys, jump into the comment section. Let's have conversations about this. Let's sort of kind of together think through how do we approach our culture as Christians. Will heads up that we won't be here next week.
Nope.
We will be. I will be sunbathing in a beach in Mexico. So as much as I love you guys, I love our crew. I have my priorities set straight, so we won't be here next week, but we'll return back to our normal schedule after that. So just heads up. But we are here this week, so why don't we just jump into it and kick things off with some cultural conversations. So one of the main things that's been kind of everywhere lately, all the way up to the White House and news outlets, is this: are we finally answering the question of whether or not we are alone in the universe? So there's been some UFOs spotted, unidentified objects shot from the sky, a lot more questions than answers. So to kick things up, why don't you just is this? I guess the main question is is this the first wave, or have they been among us this whole time?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask, but it is interesting. I don't know. I think ultimately it's kind of hard to say, but it is really fascinating, and I think we've been given more questions than answers, especially by our government, because there was that whole incident with the Chinese weather balloon that got off course, that was finally shot down several days later, and so what I've heard is a lot of the radars and stuff have been sort of tweaked to now pick up smaller objects, and so suddenly they're picking up all these smaller objects and now shooting them down. There was 3 or 4 over the weekend that were shot down. Those have not been, as far as I know, recovered. Certainly not as speedily as the balloon that was shot down. So it's probably wasn't a balloon, because if it was, they recovered that pretty quickly and was hey, we shot a balloon.
Because even the White House officially there's been so much buzz about this.
Yeah.
Deny it, which I would say is exactly what
government
infiltrated by aliens would want us to think.
Exactly.
But it is interesting. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time into aliens until they start, their full on attack. But I do find it interesting, this sort of, as a Christian, just as a person, the fascination with aliens. I feel in so many ways, it's almost this sort of quasi-religious, or at least a lot of our religious tendencies and longings almost get transposed onto aliens, where it does tap in, I think, to this sense of mystery and other beings in the world, and, something beyond our own existence, and even the way that we think of aliens tends to be in a very kind of religious way of either it's this they're this benevolent force that they came and they built the pyramids for us and they gave us technology and then they left us on their own. Or else it's they're the Zeus, they're these petty, they're gonna show up and smite us because we're smaller than them. So many things about a sort of religion ends up kind of getting grafted into this whole like alien stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just the fascination with the unknown, and like the universe is so big, and you know, if you think about it rationally, it's like, well, of course there's got to be something out there, because it's like it's just so enormous. Like it seems like it'd be crazy for there not to be, just because of the size of the universe. But on the other hand, it's like if there was, like where's the evidence? You know, like, and then if there is, like, you know, why would they visit Earth? I mean, so there's all these things, and I think it's a super fascinating conversation to have. But yeah, there are certainly like multiple layers of like religious overtones that are kind of like pasted on to
Yeah,
like
and even
how
like
you approach aliens.
because even like as a Christian, like the Bible doesn't necessarily like give anything to suggest that there are aliens, but I don't think it necessarily like if there was something, whether it's like a green alien and a UFO or just some kind of life, like
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily is inconsistent with the Bible. Like, that's
Yeah.
even like I was thinking like the equivalent is almost like Narnia. Like that's what Lewis did. Like if there was another universe out there, how would God relate? Like in an animal world, he would appear to them as an animal, and like, he would relate, and like that doesn't change what the reality of our world. And so I don't know. I think whether there are aliens or not, maybe we'll find out soon. But it is. I do think it is. It taps into a lot of like spiritual longings and stuff.
Yeah.
And this kind of quickness to embrace that there might be something, which I do as a Christian, I do think is interesting. But probably the biggest story, sort of the related to the Super Bowl and all that stuff, is the new ad campaign. So why don't you tell us, Sam? What's
Yeah,
going on
so
with this?
you know, like aliens may or may not be among us, but the good news is Jesus has been among us, and he was just like us. And I think you'll be happy to hear, Daniel, that you know, he had all the same struggles that we did. He was a refugee. We have all these ads leading up to the Super Bowl that he also didn't like politics. You know, he had strained relationships as well. You know, he was sometimes down on his luck. Like he, you know, struggled to reconcile what his future might hold. And so everything that you've experienced as a human, so has Jesus. And wasn't it cool to see Jesus in the Super Bowl of all places? And so you actually just wrote a piece about this. And well, he was canceled too. I like that one. It's really on the nose of today's society. But you recently wrote a piece on this. We published it at thecollision.org. Encourage you guys to check that out. But what do you think about this, Daniel? Is this like, did Jesus need a PR company to come in and sort of spruce up his image or make it more relatable? Like, do you feel like this is a net positive for Jesus, for Christianity, or did you have other feelings about this?
Yeah. So this is. I gotta say too. Like the way you did the segue to this topic means that I may never introduce the topic ever again. That you brought your A game for there. But this has been. I don't know. I'm fascinated by this. I know there's a lot of like opinions and like, as with literally anything in our society, like it's got pulled into like politics and like that side of it, and like I think we can like set that aside, like the political controversy of it. But the ads themselves, I think, tap into to stuff that I feel like I personally always kind of wrestled with, or like tried to think through of like it's sort of less like the specifics of the ad, but more like the approach of like very much, because again this ad, if you kind of boil it down, even like on their like website, they sort of state like we have an agenda, and it's to like kind of recontextualize Jesus through like a modern lens, and like kind of make him relevant and relatable by showing how he connects to like things that we're familiar with, and like how he's sort of like us. Because even like on their website it says like Jesus get to our lives because he was human too.
Yeah. So that's a fascinating statement. And so what would you say, like, are there problems with that statement? Like, how would you unpack that for us? And I know you do in the article as well, but for here, like that seems like on the surface you might say, well, that's true. I mean, like Jesus was human, like he walked among us, and like he does get us. But what's the danger maybe in a statement like, Jesus, he gets us because he was human too.
Yeah, well, I think there's again, I think this is such like a complicated. Like on the one side, people are talking about Jesus. So like I think that is Christians can be excited about that. Like it's
Yeah.
coming out of the Super Bowl, like all the other things like halftime shows and like the Grammy Sam Smith stuff from like the last couple of weeks. Like it's refreshing to like however they're talking about it. Like Jesus is a conversation topic, which is obviously the design of the ad is just to like to poke people and like to be a conversation thing and to be kind of controversial. So I think like Christians should be happy about that aspect of it. I guess my concerns with this whole approach is more the like, are we being too quick to like, well, if it's about Jesus, it's good. We just need to. That's our team. Like we need to support it, or are there some issues with like the Jesus that is being presented? And I think it's because this is a wider topic for like just in general and like TV shows and stuff. But like, what happens when you like humanize Jesus? Like, which is sort of what this campaign is doing. It's like taking Jesus from like up here, which is in the heavens and beyond us, and like taking him down to like our level of like we can relate. He's just like us. Like Jesus. If you want to know what Jesus is like just look around you, look inside you. Like, this is what Jesus is like. And I think there's several like kind of the deeper I've dug into some of like this ad and stuff, kind of the more icky it gets, like to me, or like at least concerning. Like there's a on one of their ads, like the struggle on their website, like beneath the ad, they have this quote, which is sort of someone giving feedback to what they felt watching this ad. It says, "The idea that Jesus is just like me, as opposed to the message that I need to change to become more like him, is extraordinary to me. It completely transforms my thought process around Jesus." And like, I don't know that.
If you're paying attention, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah, like that's a like that's sort of a backwards gospel of like, faith is about like it's the story of how God like came to understand us and like had to live like us to get us, rather than like that we're called to something higher. Like
yeah, I mean, I think that's a real telling sort of response. Like, oh, I don't need to change. I'm accepted and perfect the way I am, and Jesus just sort of comes to me and just sort of envelops me and me. Like, isn't it great that I don't have to do anything. Like Jesus has done everything to like relate to me and has said, "You're great. Like you just keep being you. You don't need to change anything. Like I'm not going to call you to a higher purpose. I'm not going to require greater standards for you. Like you just be you and all of the problems that you have." Like it's almost the antithesis. In fact, I think it is the antithesis to the gospel. Like, in fact, you're not okay, and the whole point of the gospel and Christ coming to be among us is that we're not okay.
And even like him coming was because he was not like us. Like
right,
because like we couldn't save ourselves. Like
exactly,
God, who is different, came and I do think like Jesus does get like that part of it. Like I think Jesus understands what we went through. Like, but this framing of he gets us because he lived it isn't unique to like this. Like pastors, like lots of pastors and stuff have used that framing of like Jesus knows what you're going through because like he was criticized too, and so when you're criticized, no, like Jesus knows or he suffered. But kind of like in the article, I get into two like issues if you follow that train of thought too far. Like, and the first one is just that it kind of reduces God's. It humanizes God's ability to like understand. Like it equates like God had to experience, put his hand in the fire to know that it was hot, because he didn't know that ahead of time. Like he had to go through the same thing in order to understand us, which is sort of it leads to like a very small God. Like one, it means the God of the Old Testament like was out of touch because he hadn't come to earth yet. Like so he's trying to guide the Israelites, but like he doesn't understand them. He doesn't know what they're going through. Like so, it kind of makes him out of touch. Like that God doesn't just know things. And then like the other side of it, like the other implication, is just there's issues for the things that Jesus didn't experience. Like obviously
Right.
he was bullied. He experienced stress or like all those things that like if you experience those, like Jesus gets you. The problem is like Jesus never was married. Like Jesus didn't have kids.
Yeah. Jesus wasn't a
He
woman.
wasn't a woman. Like Jesus wasn't abused as a kid. Um, Jesus wasn't from a broken home. Like Jesus, he faced temptation, but like he never faced guilt from like giving into temptation. Like
Yeah.
Jesus never experienced imperfection. Like he might have been like experienced like hunger and thirst, but like he never made mistakes. Like he didn't sin.
Yeah.
Like there's no regrets. Like there's so many experiences that like Jesus didn't do, and like so like the problem with this ad is like, so what happens to those? Like,
Yeah.
does Jesus not get us if you went through those? Because like if he does get us, then that just sort of defeats the whole purpose of the ad campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. And we have a comment here from Monty that you need to change isn't good news. Jesus is just like you isn't good news. Jesus is holy and can make you holy is good news. And yeah, I would agree, Monty, on that. That the whole point of the gospel and the good news is that we do have a savior and that there is hope for humanity, and it isn't humanity, because it's like if that's the hope, then we're all we're all doomed. And I think that's maybe in sort of a broader context as well. And this touches on some of the other stories that we'll talk about today and we've talked about in the past. But this idea that we need to sort of, like the church needs to lower its standards or sort of contextualize Jesus in such a way that like, hey man, he's your homeboy. Like Jesus is just like us. He had all the same struggles that we have. Like, rather than sort of saying like, here's the standard, here's why it's the standard, here's what the Bible says about all of these issues, and this is why it says it, and this is how it can impact your life. We sort of just bring the gospel and bring Jesus down into sort of the muck of every day and say, well, that's fine. Like, you don't need to change. And it's almost this idea of like being seeker friendly. If that was I guess a term of church people, like trying to do church in such a way to make it like more attractive. Like the gospel isn't attractive enough. Like we've got to like humanize it more somehow and make it seeker friendly. Like, well, people want this because it sort of like makes less of their sin or their issues. And isn't it nice to just get a hug from Jesus and like everything will be okay? But again, like you lose the power of the gospel when you start like sort of taking apart the gospel so much so that it's like, well now what this is just like a therapy session at church. It's just a country club that you kind of go to and feel warm and fuzzy about, but there's no power, there's no life change, like there's no higher calling.
Yeah, I think even like it almost makes it less relevant. Making it like it ties it to sort of like the now, kind of taking it down from more like the timeless. Like God is outside of our, he gets us. Like he understands it because he's God. Like he understands. He's all knowing. He's not bound to like our experiences. Like it transcends. Sort of. We don't know until you try it. Like God transcends that. Like I feel like the more you try and pull it down to like the moment, like the less, like the more diluted the news goes. And I do get that like it's like and it gets tricky. Like Jesus was human,
Right?
He was God at the same time, and like our rational brains cannot compute that, and like we can't depict like, things like The Chosen or like other shows or like The Passion of the Christ. Like it's like impossible for us to depict that or like frame that because it's beyond our frame. Like so you almost have to choose. Like you got to lean into God as divine and other, or God is just like us, but you kind of sacrifice kind of on either end. Like it becomes, like you don't get the full picture. But even like Monty was saying, like every other religion has to offer a human teacher, Messiah, whatever you want to call him, that walked among the people and experienced humanity. Like what separates the Christian gospel is that like it was God. Like it wasn't just human. He understood us whether he experienced that thing or not on earth. Like he experiences us today, even though he was on earth 2,000 years ago. So I don't know. I think it's a complicated thing. I don't know what's going to come from this. Like, I don't necessarily think that, this is going to like make or break faith, the church or something like. But I do think that I get a little cautious for like anything that's Jesus with the Jesus branding. We got to just be excited for. And like, isn't it so cool that Jesus was in the Super Bowl? And like, I think it's important to like think through the implications of like what Jesus are we like? Are we present? People are talking about Jesus, but like, is it the holy God, that like perfect God, or is it like sort of the good moral teacher that went through a lot of stuff like we do, and we can be like, just like Jesus, and we don't need to be like him, because he became like us. And so I do think that those are important conversations to have as Christians, to think through, especially when it comes to like an ad or like a PR thing as widespread and like pushed as this. Like, a lot of people are talking about it. Christians should definitely think through that. But speaking of conversations that we should have, ones that are always relevant, always timeless, you never need to contextualize because they always speak every second week in our live streams. We have the next segment, Host Corner.
Well, something, Daniel, that I can confidently say has stood and will stand the test of time is one of the greatest TV shows ever made, and that, of course, is The X-Files. Our favorite intrepid investigators, Scully and Mulder, Fox Mulder. This came out in I think the early 90s is when it started, and I think it was like almost 2-3 years ago that like they had like a final season, like, one of these like sort of reboots. But I figured since we're talking about aliens, if you want to get a great show about aliens and the unexplained phenomenon that has plagued our society since the dawn of time, then I highly recommend the X-Files. It's a blast from the past, but I think it can still be enjoyed today, and it's just cool to see like all the retro stuff, and it's just a super fun show. So have you seen The X-Files?
I did. Like right after I got married, me and my wife moved to California, went to school. Like, we had nothing. We had like a tiny apartment, like the size of this like table. We had like a TV and like a couch, and that was our entire apartment. And my brother had like all the box sets, like, cause we didn't have like streaming and stuff back then. Like, so we got all those sets, and like that's like how we started our marriage. Was like we watched through all like 10 seasons or however long it goes, and like they're great. They're so good. Like, you can see like how they influence later.
Yeah.
And like, but just that like core premise of like the like kind of science and faith, like he's
right,
the one that believes she's like the skeptical one, and like
she's a science,
and they sort of frame every phenomenon like, well, it could be taken rational. There is a rational explanation. Like, so I do think like there is stuff even like for Christians that like that's such an interesting, and then like throughout the seasons they almost like switch places, and like now he's skeptical and she's faithful, and like they do a lot of interesting stuff. And I think even she's like in the show she's Catholic or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
I think so.
Like she has some upbringing
or some like
some kind of religious
maybe not
thing,
practicing,
like,
but
like obviously they don't like play into that a whole ton, but like that is like a part of her thing. So it is worth watching. It is worth, I think the later seasons kind of fall off the quality wise.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the danger of any
like
alien based show. Like eventually, it's gonna kind of start to deteriorate.
It's 10 seasons later. Is it aliens? Is it not? Let's do this again.
How many times can we answer this question?
She's taken by alien to the mothership again. But hey, it is definitely worth watching. But I don't have a clever segue from X-Files to our next conversation. I feel already like after Sam's segue that I don't even know if I want to try anymore.
You can do it.
I've been humbled. But hey, we still have a few more stories, so maybe I'll work up to it. But so our next story is kind of a follow-up to stories that we've talked about before in the last 5 or 6 weeks in various ways. And maybe we don't want to get like super down the trail on this because we've touched on some of it. But it is, I think, touching on like a conversation that continues to be relevant, continues to be, or at least prominent. A lot of people, headlines and stuff this week about this story. Candace Cameron Bure, she's been a feature here several times. Her brother, Kurt Cameron, we talked about him a couple weeks ago too. And I don't remember how long ago we talked about her like a great American family, and like she made comments and she got criticized by JoJo or whoever the pop star is, and like there's that whole thing about that they weren't going to have like LGBT storylines and the conversation. So that fire died down, and so kind of for the first time since then, Candace Cameron Bure has like spoken up, like kind of telling more of the story, reigniting some of that. So she was on a podcast just the other day, I think maybe yesterday, Unapologetic, a popular podcast, and kind of sharing like a widespread on different issues. But she did end up kind of talking about kind of some of the incidents that happened and kind of what came from that, and kind of got into touched on the everyone's favorite topic of cancel culture and sort of her experiences kind of through that whole Great American Family thing. And like the headlines make it seem I think a little more strong, like like the Rolling Stone and stuff, than like the actual comments in the podcast. But basically she talks, said, hey, there is sort of persecution and pushback to people that hold to traditional values, people that hold to Christianity. It kind of says like there is like a cushion where people sort of get their feelings hurt when they're criticized, which is of a lesser quality than like being like killed and imprisoned for being a Christian in other places. But then she does go on to say, and nevertheless, cancel culture is real and it's difficult and it's hard. And then she sort of encourages kind of Christians, especially young Christians, to like, we're stronger together. Like, the world's going to try and cancel us for what we believe, but sort of the way to combat that is to stand together. So what are some of your thoughts on this? Again, like I'm a fan of Candace Cameron. I've been a fan of her for a while, all the way back to the Full House years, and like what she's doing. Like I get she is in a very difficult spot.
Yeah.
But I don't know, some of these comments, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's sort of one of those things where, you get to a point where it's sort of like, is this really cancel culture, or is it just like criticism for your beliefs? And it's like, I don't think she's had any like contracts fall through. Like she's not getting pulled off of interviews. Like she still has a lot of outlets that she can get her messaging across. Like she hasn't been like banned from social media as far as I know. And so it's like, I think there's this conflation that happens in situations like this where it's like, people who disagree with you are suddenly trying to cancel you rather than just disagree with you. And that's not making a judgment on what people who do disagree with Candace, like maybe they would like to never see her speak again. Like that could be totally true. But like, is she being canceled for this, or is this like shorthand for like, hey, I'm a conservative in sort of a Hollywood machine adjacent place that I need your support so we can fight against woke culture in Hollywood, or is this actually cancel, like is she actually like losing jobs because of this, and she's not able to work now and she's been like blacklisted, or do we have a place for her to go and speak and do her thing and make movies?
That is
and
sort
that
of
kind
one of
stuff.
the I guess some people on like social media doing this, like just like compiling all these headlines of like Candace Cameron speaks out about the difficulty of cancel culture, and it's like literally any news outlet that you've ever heard of like has a headline for it. Like it's like she's canceled, but like these 25 major networks and stuff are covering every word she said. So it's like, isn't that the opposite of like cancel culture? I think maybe and again, I don't envy her position. Like it's easy for
certainly
us,
not, yeah,
to just speak boldly, just get out there, like says people without a big platform and without everyone like making headlines of everything she says. Like I get and I think she has been she has lost stuff. Like she has suffered from being a bold Christian. Like, so I don't take that away, but it almost ties back to the he gets us ad of like, I also think like words matter. Like, and I think some of the, almost like what she's saying with like persecution in other places is obviously a lot worse. Like it's almost like we as Christians in like North America, like almost have like a complex about that like there is persecution, but like it's not as like violent and stuff as like sometimes we make it out to be, or like, that it is in other places. That it's almost like we have to manufacture a little more, like, the world is just so against. They're just gonna come and like obviously like criticism and like rude comments and piling on and all that kind of stuff. Like that is a bad enough thing already. But like I don't know. I think there is this tendency to like to sort of make faith, like the church, almost more of a victim of society, and like fit this narrative that like the world's canceling us, even when like by the definition, like that's not cancel.
Yeah.
If you're not losing a job, if you're not losing a platform, like if you're not, if you're still like in the news every day, like then you're not really getting canceled. Like, and I think it almost diminishes the actual instances of that, where like anytime you say something that's sort of against the grain and people on social media push back about it, it's like, well, we're canceled. Cancel culture rears its head again, and like it sort of messes it all up. That like when there is cancel culture, it just sort of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. Like as this whole idea is kind of dragged on, it's like now there's actually and again, this is not to say that this is what Candace is doing, but there's a lot of hay to be made by using words like cancel culture. It's like, so you can gain a following, you can get on podcasts, like a lot of people are really interested that so-and-so is canceled, and now they're speaking out and they're, pushing back against Hollywood, ideologies or agendas. Like there's actually a growing place for canceled individuals to go and like preach their cancellation message or whatever it may be. And so I do think there is sort of a loss of that actual term. And so it's not actually cancel culture. It's, you're just going against maybe a mainstream narrative and people don't like that. And so they're going to say mean things about you. That doesn't mean that like your employer is pulling your job. And I think there are cases where true cancel culture, and I think most of that probably happens without our knowledge of it, because it's like happening to normal people who, maybe just took a stand at work and now they don't have a job because they felt like something was wrong and they went against their beliefs. Whereas, more public figures say things, they get backlash, they say some more things, and they sort of build their tribe and sort of everyone's fine. And now we have these two parallel.
Well, and it's almost like by definition, like the people that are talking, like the famous people like, about cancel culture, like the stories that we hear about it, like implies that they're still a platform. Like it's almost like they're not. Like, they're still obviously like the fact that we're hearing all these stories and it's trending, like means that like they may have lost some of the platform, but like they still obviously have a platform to get it out there. Like as opposed to people that you don't hear from, because there's the everyday people and like they do lose a job and they don't have a they can't do the press tour of like uncancelable like kind of thing. So I don't know. I think it as Christians, I think words do matter. I do think cancel culture is very much a thing. I think it would be more of a thing if everyone got their way and like no one stood out against it. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love for Candace Cameron to like just disappear and never speak out against these issues. But I do think it almost is a way of it's like it can almost be a self-serving thing of like we're speaking the truth and we're criticized and like we're sort of doing the right thing and like sort of forcing it to be this sort of narrative of like this persecution almost like rewards us in a way of like now we can kind of use this branding and we're it makes us look better that obviously I'm doing the right thing because the world wants to shut me down.
And I think that is a danger of the church to be sort of persecuted, but not for the right reasons. And I think that's sort of where the rub comes. It's like, okay, well, sure, you're getting pushback, but is it because you're loving people the way Christ loved people, or is it because like, you're disagreeing with certain movies or something? And so like there's a certain badge of honor, I think, that starts to creep in that says, oh, yeah, you said these things. And it's like, well, the things you said were actually incredibly rude and insensitive. And like, so there's also that like sort of this need in Christianity to be persecuted almost, but we can sometimes just manufacture that and then feel better about ourselves. That like, oh, look, we are experiencing resistance and we must be on the right track because of that. And
Yeah,
not
it can make
actually.
it more about us rather than just the fact that, hey, we're just speaking truth and doing our thing. But hey, let us know what you guys think of that. If you guys have any issues with that, or if you think, hey, she's right and she should speak out about that. We don't have a ton of time, so we're not going to get far into this story, but did want to at least mention it. Kind of another thing that's been trending. Joshua Bassett, who I will be totally honest, I won't pretend like this is someone that I had a whole lot of familiarity with. This guy wasn't on my on my iTunes playlist, although my wife was familiar with him because he did appear on I think several things, but he appeared on a rebooted High School Musical show that came with like Disney Plus.
Your favorite series of all time?
Yeah, well, hey, it picks up the longer it goes. The tension definitely rises. But so he was on that show, and he's sort of been in the news for like his romances with famous other celebrities, and so he's just sort of like he's an influential guy. Even like on his like Instagram and social media, he has like millions of followers. So like I'm in the minority of being like, who's this guy? Oh. Does this guy play metal music? I guess not. But he's been in the news, and I kind of was I don't know when this would happen. Maybe a month or so ago. He just randomly tweeted out like something about Jesus being Lord, and like everyone was like assumed that his like account was hacked. Like all these comments like trying to check in on him, or like is he okay, or like hacked and like stuff. And well, it turns out maybe it wasn't his account hacked, but maybe his soul was hacked by Jesus, because turns out that might be the dumbest thing I've ever said. It turns out that he is sincere and that he is on this faith journey. Because a couple of days ago, he is like tweeted out he got baptized. He's sort of given a testimony, and it's a good testimony. Like, he sort of shares like, hey, I was famous, I was successful, in some ways similar to the to the right thing that we talked about last, the acceptance speech, and saying, hey, nothing satisfied me until I found Jesus. I think he said like no other teacher like ever could do for me what Jesus has done. Like he's Lord. So he's sort of being very public, tweeting out kind of the about the gospel and like evangelistic and this testimony. But because we can't have good things, because people need to be mad about something, he got some pushback. Because again, I think his part of his story that he came out a couple of years ago as being queer and like sort of speaking very much on behalf of like the LGBTQ community and all that kind of comes with that. So immediately, sort of people push back on him. Kind of like, hey, why do you go get baptized in this church that doesn't support sort of your sexuality and all this kind of stuff? And sort of you're almost like you betrayed what you stand for by endorsing this church that doesn't believe this. So he followed this up with a tweet after. Says, I visited the church and happened to get baptized here. I was unaware of some of their policies and beliefs and do not endorse all of them. My heart is for Christ and Christ alone. And then I think he did like one more follow-up tweet after this morning saying like, hey, I love everyone. Just like, let's not make a big deal about this. So I don't know. What are your, because we don't know the whole story. There's so much to it. We don't need to get into it. Like all the specifics or what he necessarily, he didn't elaborate on some of that, but like, it's just, at least to me, this is like an example of sort of like this modern social media world of like where these sort of personal things unfold like in real time with an audience. But like, what is your?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just what it is. It's like he's, obviously going through something like, he's perhaps has been saved, like he's been baptized, like he's going through a journey right now, and good for him. See where it goes, like, support him and all that. But it's like there needs to just maybe be less of a rush to kind of cling on to someone famous who says anything positive about Jesus. Like I get the urge to do that, or to be like, oh wow, that's awesome, like so and so is a Christian now, or whatever. But there is just this, and I think it's just that desire for a hero, that desire for somebody to kind of be on our team that's kind of out there in the world. And so I don't know, I guess like the church has maybe not learned its lesson with like Kanye West. It's sort of what I'm thinking of. It's like, wow, yeah, this is great. Like, and then so it's like, oh, well, maybe he doesn't exactly line up with what we believe. And it's like people people are not uniform in how they come to know the Lord and their beliefs about, Christianity. Like there are going to be some some issues that people have, and so I think probably the best thing to do is just maybe support him and see where this goes, and not be too quick to sort of like, this is the new standard bearer in Hollywood for us, until he's not. And it's like,
and like he may like, I don't necessarily like doubt his sincerity. Like I
Yeah.
hope that he is.
well, it seems, I mean, based on
seems
what
like
he
he's
said,
not, like obviously he's only been like a week, but like it seems like he's not like backing down necessarily. Although he did sort of backtrack a bit from sort of the church, and apparently he just sort of showed up and got baptized. I don't know how that.
yeah,
how
which
that,
I mean, I think the bigger question is more maybe on the church side of it. Like, can you just like show up to a church and just get baptized? Like, I don't know.
I don't know
Like,
if the church like knew who he was. Like I think it seems like he just sort of, this video went out and like someone found it and like, hey, this famous person got. Like, I don't think the church was necessarily like even knew who they were baptizing. But it's just sort of, at least to me, this sort of showcases this like how incidents like this become like this almost like a sporting event of like,
yeah,
you have people in the stands and they're sort of from both sides, and like I thought you were one of us. I thought you were one of us. Don't push back. You're on our team. And like just sort of this
stand firm. Like,
yeah, sort of. And I guess in some ways we're being hypocrites because like we're talking about it on this show, but just sort of riding this wave of like, like this very kind of personal faith journey. Like I think it should be shared and like it could be celebrated, but just to also like step back a little bit and just like let it play out. And like there's a lot going on. Obviously he's like an influential person. Like that is notable for Christians when an influential person is like tweeting out the gospel saves and like Jesus is the Lord. Like
yeah.
So it's cool, but it's just, I don't know. It just, to me, it just sort of symbolizes so much of this like, we follow everything kind of in real time on social media. And,
Yeah.
Now we're excited. Well, now he's backtracking, so now we're kind of mad with him, and because he's not like already this sort of possessiveness of like, well, if you're one of us, then you got to be all us, and like if you got to fall in line, and like sort of this criticism. And again, that's happening from both sides. But hey, a lot of stuff going on. Some stuff that we didn't get a chance to get into. Maybe we'll get into not next week because we won't be here. A reminder, won't have a live stream next week, but the next week, which should have a lot of a backlog of cultural stories, and we'll probably be sporting some nice tans.
Hopefully. Or sunburns.
Yeah, or sunburns, as typically is the case. But hey, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Again, if you guys are watching this video, like if you find us later and not watching it live, still throw some comments in, have a conversation about some of these issues, whether it's sort of the ad or the cancel culture, whatever stories that we talked about this week. Would love to just dialogue about all of that with you guys. If you haven't done so, encourage you to subscribe to our channel, like the video, just become a collider. We'd love to have you be a part of what we're doing here. Most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through the world for Christ.